and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. Now, transparency is one of the cardinal principles driving democracy and a major component of democratic governance. But this principle has for long been bedeviled by corruption, a phenomenon that has persisted for decades through misappropriation of funds, bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, and money laundering by public officers in trust of public funds. Now, the need to address this scourge led to the setting up of anti-graft agencies like the EFCC, the ICPC, the CCB, the CCT, and others. Now, the agencies collectively have recorded some successes and breakthroughs with support from various administrations over the years. Now, how did they fare in 2021? And what are Nigerians expecting in 2022? These and more will be discussed on the program tonight. But first, let's get to see this report by Dele Atumbi.
Corruption, no doubt, is a pressing issue in Nigeria with its attendant effects on the economy and the people. It causes low government presence in terms of dividends of democracy to the people, as huge sum of money goes to the drain in the process of the award of government contracts in all the tiers of government. The endemic nature of the menace has impacted negatively on the people, leading to capital flight, abysmal infrastructural growth, resulting in lack of good roads, lack of drugs in hospitals, which eventually leads to medical tourism, lack of good and effective teaching and learning environment. This has impacted the quality of the manpower with overdependence on white-collar jobs, as well as the mentality of assuming that the proceeds of corruption are national cakes. Due to the negative effects of corruption on the people and the nation, on assumption of duties in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari strengthened the anti-graft agencies to be able to fight corrupt practices. 7 years down the line, a lot has been achieved in the country's holistic fight on corruption. Though the wheel of justice may be slow, gradually justice is served, as many politically exposed persons, including former governors, are currently serving different jail terms in various prisons for their involvement in corruption.
Well, the assessment is always being looked at from three different perspectives. Prevention, enforcement, by enforcement, of course, investigation and prosecution, as well as asset recovery. And if you look at it, of course, the government, since this present government come on board, and of course, since when I came on board, we have been trying as much as possible to see that from these three different perspectives, issues are being pushed. If you look at it from the government perspective, I tell people that on the preventive aspect, raising awareness about the corruption itself, to the generality of Nigerians is one of it. When you look at issues of the treasury single account, is part of it. Issues of prosecution itself can be seen as a preventive measure, against corruption. And you will agree with me that there has never been a time when high-profile and meaningful Nigerians of means, were charged to court and prosecutions or convictions were secured on them, etc., etc.
In June 2021, former chairman House of Representatives Pro Panel on Oil Subsidy Regime, Farouk Lawa, bagged a 7-year jail term for receiving a $3 million bribe from oil magnate Femi Otedola. A High Court of the FCT found the former lawmaker guilty on all the 3 counts charged preferred against him by the ICPC. The court ordered him to refund $500 to the federal government. The former chairman of the pension tax team, Abdul Rashid Maina, was one of the 2,220 cases which the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission prosecuted and got conviction in 2021.
Government should be interested in finding out what is the root cause of this corruption. It's like you are fighting terrorism, you are not looking at the root cause. You just be killing people. Will that stop it? Why don't we go to the root cause? What is causing? What is fueling it? Does it have to do with our system of government? Does it have to do with our education?
Must be that quality of drafting of their charges, step taken during prosecution, how to assemble their witnesses, as and when due. And these witnesses are Nigerians too. Most of you bring all these bankers to enter and bring their account statement. These are their customers. And our system wants somebody who has plenty of money to be their customer as a banker.
Apart from several property which have been forfeited to the federal government, in 2021 alone, the EFCC recovered over 152 billion naira. As successful as the corruption fight is, observers say attention should be focused on prevention rather than recovery, as recovery gobs a lot of human and material resources. For Tuesday Life, Dele Atumbi.
Well, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let me introduce our guest to you. I'd like to welcome to this program Senator Osarime Osubo, a professor of law, former governor of Edo State, and also former chairman of the Nigerian Law Reform Commission. Thanks for being here, Prof.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Let me also welcome to this program Dr. Sebastian Gwimi, Director, Intelligence, Investigation and Monitoring, Code of Conduct Bureau, CCB. Thanks for being here tonight.
It's a pleasure having me.
All right. We are also joined tonight by Mainasara Kogo Umar, lawyer, economist, renowned public affairs commentator. Mainasara, welcome to Tuesday Live once again. Good to see you.
Yes, it's an honor to be here.
And also with us, Dr. Daniel Bwala is a legal practitioner. Thank you for being here.
With me.
Well, joining us via Zoom from Jos is Attorney Alemika, a member of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. He's a professor of criminology and sociology of law at the University of Jos. He joins us via Zoom. Prof, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Cyril. Compliments of the season.
All right, same to you. Well, as usual, we always acquaint you with the procedure. Part of it is that at some point in time, you can get to join the discussion in the studio. We'll refresh your memory at that time, but let's quickly say that at that time, remember to turn down the volume of your TV set. If you're calling in, the numbers will be on your screens, and we also advise you to take advantage of those numbers. But then when it gets to that time, we'll remind you of the process. For now, let's start off this discussion by taking a look at how some of the anti-graft agencies fared in the year 2021. And that will help us project into the expectations for 2022. Professor Osubo, taking a cursory look at the fight against corruption and the activities of all the agencies who are charged with this responsibility, how would you score them in 2021?
Well, I think they've performed well in the sense that they've remained in the consciousness of the public. An essential component in the fight against corruption is public awareness, public sensitization. And I believe that the principal institutions or agencies for anti-corruption, ICPC, EFCC, Code of Conduct Bureau, those are the direct ones, have been quite visible in the media, and their activities have been visible. Only a few days ago, the chairman of the EFCC actually came out to reel out some of their achievements during the year 2021, the number of convictions that they recorded, the amount of recoveries that they made of money back into the public purse, and so forth and so on. In the course of the year, I know that the ICPC was also very active and, in fact, visiting some states. in addition to the advocacy which both organizations have embarked upon for some time now of carrying the awareness, the fight to the public. Like the ICPC, the institutions of higher learning and governmental bodies understand have anti-corruption desks and carry out sensitization. They even have a bulletin, a newsletter which they publish. EFCC is doing the same, carrying out road shows and so forth and so on. These are essential in order that we begin to change the orientation and the perception of the Nigerian public vis-a-vis corruption. Because many people have the view that our background, the African background, the Nigerian background is one, and our attitude towards public morality is one that, if not condoning corruption, having a very mild attitude, where they are supposed to condemn corruption. You find that corruption in all its shapes and forms is condemned when it is the other party, where the perpetrator belongs to the other community or the other party. And where it involves somebody within their own communities, they don't see that as corruption. They see that as God's blessing, as a sign that the person has been successful. And any attempt to rain down on such an individual is perceived as people who are envious of his success. We need to change that mindset. And I see that what the anti-corruption agencies have been doing is devoting a lot of their time, resources, and attention in creating that awareness. That in itself will be a major achievement.
All right, we'll take it up from there and other matters. But let's come to Dr. Gwimi. Well, you represent the Code of Conduct Bureau. First, let's start from the premise that for many Nigerians, what they know, especially public servants and civil servants, what they do know of the Code of Conduct Bureau is when they have to fill certain forms to talk about assets and all that. And right after that, everyone goes to sleep, so to speak. And so many other Nigerians are actually a little bit confused about the Code of Conduct Bureau and the Code of Conduct Tribunal. So let's start by you putting things clearly first, so that quite a number of those who don't quite get it will get it right now.
Thank you, Cyril. Let me firstly start by saying that the Code of Conduct Bureau is strategically placed to fight corruption using the instrumentality, certainly, of asset declaration, like you have pointed out clearly. But then when we are looking at the fight against corruption vis-a-vis the mandate of the Code of Conduct Bureau, which states that the Bureau shall establish and maintain high standards of morality in the conduct of government business and ensure that the actions of public officials conform to highest standards of public morality and accountability. Now, you have to use instruments. You can see that the mandate is so broad that there are about 14 codes that will help you to succeed in achieving that mandate. Out of those 14 codes, the public are clearly aware of, like, maybe one, that is the asset declaration you are talking about. All the other codes are not clearly understood by the public until recently, like His Excellency is saying. Awareness. We have started creating so much awareness out there to the public. Now, the Code of Conduct Bureau uses that instrument of asset declaration as a very potent tool at preventing corruption, because corruption prevention is certainly the best antidote to fighting corruption. If we're able to prevent it, then every other thing that will come on board will just be like additions. Because you see, there are people we have that will ordinarily not want to go into committing crimes, but they do not know. If you help those people by getting them to understand the rules, then you are morally trying to justify that, okay, you've done your own part. And there are those people, of course, we have that whatever you do, if you don't prevent it, if you don't protect your property, definitely they will want to stick their necks and get it out there. Those ones, it behoves on agencies now to find ways of blocking loopholes and preventing corruption from actually happening from the beginning. And there are those, whatever you do, they will want to circumvent whatever you are doing. They will want to get to that. And these ones, you have to now use punishment, which is sanctions on them. And so for the Bureau, the asset declaration now is, like I said, a potent tool at fighting that corruption. And how do you apply the asset declaration? We draw the powers of doing that also from the Constitution, because the Constitution gives the Bureau absolute powers to receive asset declarations from public officers. Public officers certainly are only those who are receiving their stipends from government coffers, talking about Mr. President down to the lowest public officer, and of course political appointees and all of that. Everyone is expected, before beginning to perform the functions of their assignments, declare their assets to Code of Conduct Bureau. And when such declarations are made, they are examined. The examination is a cumbersome work, highly cumbersome. The public do not understand. They think as soon as they declare the document is domicile at the CCB is kept for other administrative uses. No. When you declare, it behoves on the CCB to verify the assets you have declared, and that should be done immediately. Unfortunately, I wouldn't like to go lamenting. Okay. The funds may not be there. No funds, of course, are enough for any anti-corruption agency to prosecute and fight corruption. Then when you collect those asset declarations after examination, you will keep custody of those asset declarations. It's only the Code of Conduct Bureau that has the power to keep custody of those asset declarations. And the law says you make them available to the public on terms and conditions which the National Assembly may have to prefer. But these terms and conditions are not readily available for you to do, even though the public inundates the Code of Conduct Bureau with requests. Give us asset declaration officers of Mr. President, and they will make a long list, especially non-state actors and freelance lawyers. Right. They will ask you some of those questions. Give us so and so persons asset declaration. What do you want to do with them? Nothing specifically. They just want to have them so they could, don't know, maybe intimidate or so those are other aspects. Well, you cannot get them from CCB until conditions are done.
Okay, we'll talk about those conditions. At what point, when these officials are in breach of these provisions, at what point does the CCB say, okay, we've done a bit and we see that there is something here, and then it switches over to another level?
You see, as soon as declarations are made, I told you, we verify them. The verification sets the tone. Okay. When the verifications are done, that is when you will know so and so person who says, I have so amount of wealth before becoming the governor of so and so place. As soon as he says that, we verify the assets, you examine the documents. The process of examination will show you whether that person is actually truthfully declaring or he's trying to declare in anticipation of that. And then when we look at that very well, the procedure jumps from there. When the Bureau notices that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to proceed to the Code of Conduct Tribunal, which you mentioned before, because the tribunal is the sister agency. It's the CCB is the only agency with a dedicated tribunal to fight corruption. And going there is a strict liability case.
Okay. All right. We'll come back later on and talk about just how successful that system has been in the year 2021. And you already mentioned some challenges to see if it's easy for you to carry out the verification, to stem what you yourself have described as anticipatory declaration. Yes, declaration and collection of wealth. And so I have 2,000 naira and I declare that I have 4,000 naira because I'm thinking I probably will. Yeah. But let's go over to Menasara Kugoma. Menasara, you've watched virtually every segment of the society, and I do know that you have, interest in accountability, transparency, and how the agencies that fight corruption have been going on. So, give us your score for the year 2021.
From the look of it, the records achieved by EFCC is highly commendable, and the records equally achieved by the ICPC is equally commendable, even though they are two different the ICPC in the area of sensitization, public enlightenment, education, and the rest. The EFCC in the area of prosecution. I'm not comfortable with the recoveries made, but it's highly commendable the quantum of the cases prosecuted successfully and won, 2,220. The Code of Conduct Bureau is equally an area, though I would not like to comment so much on that. 2003 down to 2006, I was there as the chief registrar of the tribunal, so I know quite a lot about it. But the central problem about these things, if you take, for example, the Code of Conduct Bureau, the Bureau, under the 5th schedule of the Constitution, talking about the 5th schedule as a further extrapolation of Section 153 of the Constitution, clearly talks about the Bureau as the most important instrument regarding the fight against corruption. For example, the Bureau is the only institution that has the mandate to investigate any public officer, from the president down to prisoner in Nigeria. From the president down to prisoner, and the doctrine of immunity doesn't apply to the activities of the Code of Conduct Bureau and as well the Code of Conduct Tribunal, because this is the only place that you can investigate whosoever. When it comes to issue of prosecution, you can delay, you can give him the benefit of the immunity, but when he leaves office, you now prosecute him accordingly. And then secondly, it has the powers to accord, to give politicians the type of heaviest sanctions the politicians will not be interested in. For example, one of the powers under the Constitution is that all the assets, all the ill-gotten properties and money can be forfeited to the state. The second one is that it can ban a public officer from holding public office up to a period of 10 years. Number 3 is that when you are in a parliamentary assembly, whether it's at the federal or at the state level or even at the local government level, they have the power to ask you to vacate the seat immediately. And they have the power also to blacklist you for any possible dissent. And even if, for example, the Attorney General, under the powers conferred on him by the Constitution, talking about sections 147, 150, and 174, you can, as a citizen, exploit the power given to you by the Constitution as per sections 21, 23, and 24, and then petition to the tribunal that Mr. So-so somebody is living above his means, or Mr. So-so somebody is changing the nation as far as issue of payment of taxes, payment of this is concerned. And the Bureau is under obligation to investigate, and then the representative of the Attorney General that is domiciled in the Bureau should be the one to prosecute accordingly. So when you look at it in that context, there is very, very important, it's a very important tool of fighting corruption. And then when you are talking about the EFCC and the ICPC, the need for synergy among the DCs under one objective. The objective is that we should first of all understand the definition of corruption. Corruption emanated from a Latin word corruptus, which means to pollute anything. So you can cause corruption between yourself and your own organs of the body, because every person is a component of 3: the body, the soul, and the spirits. So by the time you are not mutilating your body or using it wrongly, you are conducting corruption against your own body system. Then there is corruption against fellow human beings. For example, the banditry, the killings, terror activities, and the rest. Then there is corruption against institutions. For example, under Section 15, subsection 5 of the Constitution, the provision of the Constitution is that the state must is a compulsory provision, must fight all forms of corrupt practices and abuse of power. Therefore, it is not by choice. Every public officer is under duty to fight corruption. And every citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, under sections 21, 23, and 24, is duty bound to support the institutions of fighting corruption as a collective issue. But where we get the bridge is where there is inadequacy of sensitization for people to know and appreciate that your way of life, your customs, your culture, your tradition and all the totality of your way of life, you should be behaving just rather than doing it in a corrupt manner. And then apart from that, there is this aspect of the general perception. People talk about corruption in the toga of monetary offenses or governmental contractual offenses. Corruption is beyond and more than that. It is an instrument of fighting moral rectitude. In other words, the totality of individuals' way of life has to be checkmated, and that is the essence of the Code of Conduct Bureau. Moral rectitude generally, not just the issue of filling asset declaration form and the rest. And then the EFCC and the ICPC, not just talking of it in the context of those political office holders or those under governmental responsibility. They should go beyond that by educating the citizenry. For example, when you bring out some money you want to give some people, and then the first Almajiri boy by the motor park that got hold of it will now run away and then believe in the DC. That is the evidence of moral decadence within our society. For example, now, we are talking about corruption in the angle of physical sin, not in the spiritual angle. Nigeria is one of the most religious societies, but when you now get, for example, 3 pieces of Ghana must go back, fill one with Holy Bible, fill the second one with Holy Quran, fill the third one with bills of Naira, even if it's 200 Naira notes, and then ask people to queue from here to the Federal Secretariat and then be pitching 1-1. I don't need to tell you which of the 3 bags will drain down first. So corruption has turned itself so much that because people are worshiping materialism, it is trying to take over the Almighty God's place of worship. So the institutions have to go beyond the issue of celebrating successes. No, but they should go to the foundational base of sanitizing the society's culture, tradition, customs, beliefs, and this. In other words, the value system of the society should be checkmated, should be changed, so that in such a way that somebody
to pause a while here, because there certainly will be more coming from where all that came out in the last 2 or 3 minutes. So we will still want to hear them. But let's keep over to Dr. Daniel Bwala. Well, recall that one of the cardinal points of the current administration when it came into office was to fight corruption to stand still. And of course, you do know about the statement that if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. Now, looking at that, with that, against that background, how well has this fight been conducted, particularly in the last 12 months or so?
Thank you for having me. If we try to x-ray it from the perspective that you have given, and then to look at it within this period of 12 months, I think is the biggest story we have so far, because it's over the last 12 months that analysis showed that we had about 2,220 conviction, which constitute about 98.4%. And I don't know any country of the world where somebody scores 98.4, and that person will not be adjudged as an excellent person. In fact, in America, they call it A+. So it is quite a successful endeavor and effort, especially if you look at the way corruption has pervaded our society. There is no part of Nigeria where corruption is not endemic. And to be able to achieve that within this period is laudable. But what is particularly of interest to me, quite frankly, is the strategic objective of EFCC. You see, because anti-corruption fight the world over, when you see countries that have successfully dealt with or are dealing with corruption, in their countries, they are mostly countries that were able to sell the idea of the anti-corruption fight and campaign to the citizens in a way that the citizens now take the ownership and are actively involved in the process. Now, part of the strategic objective of EFCC, in fact, number one, is that increased citizen engagement. And they have quite a number of programs that they do in schools, in places like that, to get to communicate the right message and messaging to the Nigerian people to understand that, look, it is not an institution, as it were, fighting corruption, and we all are like in a movie theater, taking the popcorn and looking at them. The fight is your fight, because corruption is actually affecting the right you have to education, the right you have to healthcare, the right you have to the opportunities that life offers, so that a Nigerian person can favorably compete with somebody in America. And of course, we all know that Nigeria is blessed with so much of both human resources and natural resources. Corruption is the reason why Nigeria is at a point where poverty is described as having a throne in Nigeria. And so the approach that EFCC is giving by selling the idea to the people, they introduce what they call the Eagle Eye app. So if you want to stay anonymous and you don't want the world to know or anybody to know that you are part of people providing intelligence for the fight against corruption, all you do is, if you can photograph the proceeds of crime or corruption wherever you are, if you can upload it on that application, you can intelligently and very, very anonymously communicate the same message, and then EFCC will take it up from there. So looking at the 12 months, it is quite a successful one in every standard and from every part of the world, if you look at it.
All right. We'll look at that in more detail, but let's go back to Jos now, and we'll link up with Professor Alemika and say, again, the same question we've asked the other participants. How would you rate this, the anti-corruption agencies? Have they, so far, at least in the last 12 months, justified, the mandate that they have? And do we see that they have impacted on society in respect of the fight against corruption?
Thank you, Cyril. I think the first thing to start with, I think the agencies we have focused on so far are enforcement agencies. I think anti-corruption agencies are much wider than the enforcement agencies. Indeed, enforcement agencies should be the last resort, and therefore they're actually agencies that precede those enforcement agencies. For example, in discussing, especially in our present context, the Federal Character Commission is an anti-corruption agency, and I think they've gone away with murder without close attention being paid to them in view of the nepotism and crisis that we've recorded in employment and complaint that we have in that respect. So first, in talking about anti-corruption agencies, all the three arms of government contribute to preventing and controlling corruption. So if you are evaluating it, I think we should broaden it to mean how well has legislature, which is the starting point, contributed to anti-corruption in 2021. The second, of course, are the executives. The organs we've mentioned are executive organs. How well have they contributed? And the third one will be the judiciary. How well has the judiciary contributed to anti-corruption in the year 2021? And how well have the activities of the three been coordinated in such a way that they show or they manifest efficiency across this level? We may not be able to do that this evening, but I think in our analysis, we need to bring all the three on board, the three arms of government and their respective responsibilities. Without missing word, I think one of the challenge in the previous years and including last year is the lack of what one can see as coherence, a national consensus and coherence among the three agencies, legislature. For example, there are bills that have aided anti-corruption that have been sitting there now almost 2-3 years, and they carry over from almost the previous 3 or 4 legislative assemblies. We do know that, of course, there have been judgments that come from judiciary that citizens wonder whether those judges are actually part and parcel of Nigeria that understood the consequences of corruption and the effect of corruption in our society. Now coming to the executive, I think last year was quite eventful for the executive agencies, EFCC, ICPC, the CCB. I think in a way, we are able to assess them. And a major development that I think we should also underscore why are we able to say that they are doing very well. I think for the first time, we found that EFCC provided us with information that we can use. I think it's Mr. Minasara that pointed out that, for example, they told us that they had 98% conviction rate last year. Of course, that is cases that have been concluded. It will be interesting to know what proportion of the cases under investigation or even under prosecution were concluded. It is then that we can actually compute the efficiency of that organization. But for me, as a researcher, I'm actually excited by the fact that they were able to provide those kind of statistics more or less as promptly as they did. I think this is probably the first time we have it as promptly as we did. Usually we have it in the annual report, which usually take a longer time to be published. Over the last 2 years, in fact, the ICPC has a one-page infographic information that sums almost everything that they did. What these two information set from both ICPC and EFCC showed is that in spite of restriction of COVID, these agencies were not significantly inhibited in doing their job. And if you look the statistics even with 2019 and you compare it with 2020 and 2021, they actually showed very remarkable similarity, and in some cases actually surpassed it. Then anti-corruption measure, I've just said EFCC, ICPC are enforcement agencies. Lot about CCB. Again, I think in 2021, 2020 and 2021, there have been massive, a renewal of distribution and requirement of civil servants, public servants to fill the form, at least to declare their assets. So there's a new renewal. And as the director of investigation mentioned, last year, I think the CCB, in collaboration with TUGA, actually went ahead to simplify the code that he referred to, which enable people to know easily whether they are in breach of code of conduct procedure. And I think that simplification, I think it was launched towards the end of the year, is very helpful, because in looking at it, we take for granted a number of things. What constitutes conflict of interest? Maybe Dr. Buala will easily be able to provide us with definition, but an average person on the street or even beyond, what constitutes conflict of interest? It's a difficult term, and this kind of simplification, what is done is to say, if you are in this kind of situation, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there is likely to be a conflict of interest arising from your behavior, because many of the civil service practice or public service practice are actually characterized by a lot of conflict of interest. So the CCB had moved further in trying to educate and enlighten in the area of prevention through understanding of the codes. So if you go around these agencies, we have a lot to be happy about if we're talking of enforcement. But if we look at the other angle, like prevention, and in terms of systems, in terms of procedures, in terms of values that show repulsion against corruption, I think we still have a lot to do. Because in those cases, when we talk about prevention, of course, all the enforcement agencies have prevention mandates, but there are many agencies in society that should be doing that. We do not see them actually playing those roles. For example, National Orientation Agency, which has enormous capacity and responsibility to do that, not much focus was given to it. Again, I just mentioned Federal Character Commission, which of course ought to regulate that Nigerians are employed without nepotism. And if you tell any young person, undergraduate, graduate or non-graduate, and say, what about employment? They will tell you in Nigeria today, you get employment by who you know. You must get on the list of other legislator or a minister. The extent to which this is true, one cannot verify, but obviously it is not false. Okay. So, Cyril, I think we need to take this round-the-table assessment of the performance. I think at the level of coherence, Like I said, the judgment from the judiciary, especially in recent times, last year, the period years, showed that the arms of government are not on the same page. Okay. And I think for me, that is a worrisome thing, because it gives the citizens some kind of confusion as to what is being really pursued by government. And there is no divided government. The three arms of government constitute the same government. The judiciary cannot stand in opposition to executive. Neither can legislature stand in opposition to executive. Neither can executive stand in opposition to this three. And I think that problem of coherence is my fear.
All right. We'll look at that as this conversation progresses, but we also have a number of reports that correspondents across the country have put together in respect of this very this subject, and so we'll take the first of these reports. This one is coming from Lagos.
Corruption remains a major hindrance to the nation's development, despite efforts by government to curb the societal hill. Anti-corruption crusades by critical agencies has, however, recorded some significant results over the years, despite pockets of challenges encountered.
Some of the anti-corruption agencies are losing more than they are winning in the courts, which is what brought about the issue of desirability or otherwise of even plea bargaining option.
Statistics from the Office of the Anti-Graft Agency shows that in 2021 alone, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, recorded a monetary recovery 152,888,698,751 naira 64 kobo, just as several recoveries were made in foreign currencies between January and December of the same year. Of these figures, Lagos Command recorded second highest with 70.3 billion naira, 9.286 US dollars, and 21,000 British pounds sterling, with a number of convictions put at 481 cases, and also the highest of the 2,220 total convictions secured in the outgone year, but lost 34 cases. This achievement, according to security experts, is commendable.
That kind of matrix gives us hope that they are actually fighting the corruption. The cases were concerning cybercrime. So, corruption is not just cybercrime. I think that's where we would want the EFCC to expand.
As the number of monetary recoveries and convictions continue to rise, observers want agencies in charge of waging war against corruption in the country to double their effort in ensuring that looted funds are recovered and put to good use for the benefit of all Nigerians.
Intensify on intelligence, intercept and monitor financial transactions of all those politically exposed and even their cohorts that they may use in public sectors, because corruption is not only in government sectors, even the private sectors are also involved. Special courts for corruption cases should be set up.
If the nation must move forward, perpetrators of economic and financial crimes should be denied the benefit of the proceeds of crimes committed and should not be left unpunished.
From Lagos, we go over to Port Harcourt, and this one is by Kingsley Amajiri.
Internet fraud, illegal oil bunkering, and corrupt practices among public officials are some cases investigated and prosecuted by the anti-graft agencies within the Port Harcourt zone. Statistics from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, indicates that 230 convictions were secured in 2021. This, to keen observers, is sharing in the fight against corruption.
Internet fraud in Nigeria is massive because of the young boys that were giving them the knowledge to ICT.
For Rivers State records third highest conviction, which means there is something they are doing right. to curtail this excess. Actually, there is nowhere in the world where you don't have crimes, but the ability to curtail it, but preferably to nip it in the bud.
Critical pundits are, however, worried that beyond conviction of suspects, much feat has not been recorded in terms of recovery of looted public assets comparative to the amount stolen, especially in plea bargain deals.
Essence is that the person is still convicted, and then money is recovered to the coffers of the state. Unlike when you convict somebody and the money is lying in his bank, and he comes back after many years and is still benefiting from the money he stole or obtained unlawfully or fraudulently. So plea bargaining on its own is good, provided it does not become a subterfuge for people.
There is equally appreciable concern among the populace that alleged sacred cows still exist in the polity.
If you report these cases, or if you are privileged to have this information and you pass it on, the people who have the document, the people who have this information, use it as a means of enriching themselves.
When you talk of corruption, there are various degrees of corruption. That one, no doubt.
In the current year, proponents for change want more hands to be engaged, investigations properly carried out before arraignment of suspects, in-house purging of alleged corrupt prosecuting officials who turn privileged information of allegations of corruption to personal cash cows, and holistic campaign against corruption towards actualizing set objectives.
Well, we've seen those reports, and a few issues we might want to raise here, Professor Osuma, for instance. What is responsible for the public perception that, yes, some progress has been made, but what is the responsible for the perception that it's mainly in the area of small fries, where while the big fish swim away because they also have the resources procured allegedly through corruption to engage the services of very senior legal representation, and cases go on and on and on. Besides, it costs a lot to fight corruption. So what is it? How does the public now get this perception that, well, yes, there's been some progress, but not the way we want to see? Or is it a case of the public crying for blood?
Well, thank you, Cyril. I think perhaps the starting point to this discussion should really be a definition. I always like to start by defining so that we are all on the same page. What is corruption? And how can you fight corruption using the law? How can you fight corruption using trying to reorientate the public? These are the essential tools. In the course of this discussion, corruption virtually covers virtually every sin under the sun. But in order to be able to fight a crime, you must define it. And we saw that in the recent decision of the Supreme Court, where it said that EFCC does not have the mandate to fight all corruptions, all crimes. EFCC must be confined to the offenses that it was created to prosecute, to investigate, prosecute, and fight. So if somebody is now blaming EFCC for not going outside of his mandate to fight other types of corruption, then there is something wrong. We have to define, corruption comes in various forms. Whether you are talking of bribery, which many people are conversant with, which by far is perhaps the most damaging and pervasive type of corruption. You have embezzlement or fraud. You have dealing in influence. You have what is called solicitation. You have what is called abuse of office. Like, for instance, the reference to Federal Character Commission and such other agencies may be cases of abuse of position. not necessarily a contravention of a specific criminal law. So these are issues we need to disaggregate all this.
Yes,
but for me,
yes,
just to land, for me, I mentioned this at the very beginning, that it seems that as society, as somebody said from the report from Rivers State, that there is corruption in all parts of the world. But the difference between some other parts of the world and Nigeria is that there is usually public outrage when it happens in some parts of the world. In China, if they catch a public officer, you know the consequence is death by firing squad. I know recently a governor in Nigeria is advocating death penalty as punishment for corruption. But does that represent the general feeling of many Nigerians? It seems that our society is more tolerant of corruption than some other societies.
No, but why would that be?
Yes. You know, I have done some reading and some research on this issue, and it may interest people to know that corruption didn't start today. Even in the, as early as 1940s or even earlier, there were reports. Colonial government was setting up commissions of inquiry, probes that exposed corruption. It didn't start today. The coup of 15th January 1966 mentioned corruption, was the main thing that they mentioned as the reason for the coup. And some other subsequent coups in Nigeria mentioned corruption. But has corruption abated in spite of all this? So we begin to look at, and I mentioned before, that corruption that some Nigerians find repulsive is the one that was committed by somebody from another community. Whereas somebody from within their community doing the same thing, they will say he's very successful. So we need to be able to correct all these things. How do we correct the orientation, the attitude of Nigerians? That is key. You may enact many laws. Even another example was that the National Assembly does not seem to be responsive enough to measures that may aid in anti-corruption. Why should that be? Why should the legislators in China be more responsive to enacting legislation prescribing death penalty for corruption, and the Nigerian legislators are less responsive? Why is that? So unless you get all these things right, we will continue to talk about anti-corruption ad infinitum. There are institutions that you need to put in place, and since 1999 or year 2000, these institutions are being put in place. Okay. The ICPC Act came into force in 2000. It was the very first bill that the National Assembly considered under this democratic dispensation, followed 1 or 2 years later by the EFCC bill. Of course, the Code of Conduct was already in the Constitution. What else do we need to do? And in my view, we need to draw on foreign support, international support, and international assistance. The reason I say this is that even EFCC, the establishment of EFCC was influenced internationally through, first of all, the Financial Action Task Force, which compelled the Nigerian government at that time to put in place an Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. It was influenced from abroad. A lot of things in our past, ugly past, were influenced from abroad. Whether it is anti-slavery was influenced from abroad.
Okay.
So we need, there are systems in place internationally which we need to imbibe if we are to be able to change the mindset, the attitude of Nigerians towards corruption.
Okay, there's this question I always ask. When statistics show that, for instance, in 2019, you had XYZ number of cases you prosecuted, that by 2021, the number has shot up to maybe 2 times or 3 times more. The question I always ask, the numbers, do they reflect a reduction in corruption in society, or just an increase in the activities of the agencies concerned, which may not really be translated to a reduction in corruption?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've always said that when, for example, the road safety people go out there to catch people who are offenders on the road, and they come with large numbers of information that today they have arrested so, and so, I keep telling them that is no success at all. We want situations where when you go out, you don't get anybody. That is when you will start celebrating successes. If you go out to look around and you cannot catch one person that is not putting on a seatbelt, then you have succeeded. You clap for yourself. But the numbers do not really show that you are succeeding. A corruption aspect of it, if every year, like you say, numbers are increasing, and we're thinking because of the large numbers we're seeing in terms of conviction, in terms of arrest, and in terms of getting sums of money recovered, for me, I don't think that is success. I'm looking at a situation where we'll be able to look at that preventive aspect of it so much. If we're able to prevent people from dipping their hands into the coffers of our general patrimony and taking our funds, they are running away with them. If we are able to stop that and making it extremely difficult for you to get that, then we are succeeding. And in that case, we may not be seeing large numbers of persons again going to courts and having to suffer with that. And I've always said also that instead of suffocating ourselves to go into courts to fight people who have stolen our funds, I think for me, we should be leaving these crooks and then chasing these funds. Chase the monies. We have tried to experiment here in the country by taking people to tribunal, and we've discovered that the cases will linger for many, many years. And sometimes such persons who are even being tried will turn around and become leaders of our country. And then they will help themselves out and they will escape judgments and all of that. So what we should be looking about is, if we know where these funds are, get them all, pack them and leave the people out. For us at the CCB, like I say, it's easy to detect that. If you look at the assets that are declared, we also have positions where you show your funds, whatever you have and whatever you don't have. Then the synergies we have with NFIU and other agencies that will give us information about the person will always show us that, oh, this person has declared these banks and has refused to declare these ones. And this person has even foreign accounts, which he refused to declare. Once you are able to see this, what are you wasting time for? Go to banks and freeze these monies. Let the person suffer. See him suffering now. Don't allow him get that. Don't waste government funds going to courts, to tribunals, and so on and so forth, and have it long delays. That is my own take on that.
All right, we'll take a short break at this point. When we return, there'll be more on how the agencies have performed and what Nigerians expect in 2022, and hopefully we'll get in some phone calls. That's the participation from those who are interested in this matter and who want to air their views. Stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
I am more than just an idea. I am alive, connected. I am part of an ecosystem, creating connections within an interactive and sustainable city. I am intentional about excellence, integrity, and efficiency. I am invested in building a sustainable future.